Real pleasure to welcome Alain Vaillancourt once again to our studios. He's head of public security on the executive committee of the city of Montreal, and very appropriate that he's in this week. Of course, the headlines have not been good. Now, Montreal police say that things in this city are still, quote, pretty safe, despite the 7 homicides that have happened in the past 10 days. And it was on Tuesday in the Plateau. 2 men, 1 teen, stabbed to death following an altercation. Last weekend, 27-year-old died in the Sud-West borough from a stabbing. Last month, a woman was stabbed at a motel in Montreal. There's been a lot of incidents like this. Alain, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure, Les.
What I struggle with, in that statement, police saying the city's pretty safe. The word pretty is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. And I know there's 2 ways you can look at it. You do compare us to other cities. And boy, I'd take Montreal over the record of so many other cities in North America, so I totally get that. Having said that, 7 homicides, 10 days. I understand anyone who's feeling a little skittish about safety in the city. How do you view it?
Well, you're right. Objectively, we can say that Montreal remains safe. We still have one of the lowest homicide rates in Canada. That said, when we see events that happened over the weekend on the Plateau, it remains a fact that it scares people. We feel insecure. The fact that a 15-year-old kid got stabbed in an alleyway where I have 2 kids and they used to play in alleyways is a tragedy. And, I think of the family of that 15-year-old. So despite objectively, we can say Montreal is safe and we have all the statistics to prove it. We're still concerned when we see events that happen on the Plateau.
So what do you think's happening there? Right? I know there's all types of hypotheses. Like what is happening for there to be a brawl? And we've heard various stories. 2 groups that came together. What's going on where 2 groups can lead to 3 people? When I woke up the next morning, I woke up and I had the alert, the CJD alert. 3 people killed, stabbed in an alley. What do you what's going wrong for those to lead to those conditions where this can happen?
I think we have to distinguish what's happening. We've been successful in dealing with armed violent crime. That's on a decrease. Mm-hmm. Gangs and criminal activity. We've been quite successful with strategies we've put in. We've increased police resources. On that end, I think we're improving. What we're seeing now with the 7 deaths that happened, they're not linked. Each one isn't linked to each other. So it's not a turf war. It's not gang related. It's not an uptick in gun violence. Mm-hmm. They're really isolated incidents that aren't linked to another. So, the strategy is different. We need to, they're hard to predict. They're hard to prevent, but we still need to look at, the fact that they're happening. We put a lot of effort into prevention. The chief has put in new strategies to exactly do that, to try and locally get information, identify some of these kids or some of these people that might do these acts, meet them before it happens, and put some plans in place to help them. We're doing that, but we can't prevent them all. And the ones we've seen have included more knives. When we have knife violence, knife violence is more when you're protecting yourself. It's not necessarily a premeditative way of going about violence. So that's very different too than when it's a gun crime.
Are you worried about an increase in incivility? And the reason I ask that, I'm looking at the list of the recent events, and like you said, there's no connection here, right? It's the fight in the alleyway. It's neighbors in St. Henry. It's domestic violence situation, an ex-partner killing a woman, and so all of these things, and it just seems it's just across the board this increase in something. Does that concern you? Maybe it's, it'd be one thing if it was, we could see it's all happening here. It seems like there's stories from every facet.
It's hard to predict. When we're talking about an uptick in a turf war, gang violence, we know where it's coming from. We can put a specific strategy in, and I think probably quite successful in diminishing that. What we're seeing is more random, so it's harder to predict. Of course, we're concerned. I spoke with an organization leader in Saint Michel last week before this happened, and he was telling me he gets a bunch of calls from parents saying that they see that their kids are maybe they have guns, they have knives, different behavior, and they don't know what to do. They won't call the authorities. So I think part of the issue is we need to encourage everyone that sees signs of this type of behavior to alert the authorities, not be afraid. I myself am going to Saint Michel in a couple of weeks to talk to a group of parents to try and encourage them to do that. So I think we have to look at it more systemically and more like an overall view as opposed to a criminal activity that is easy to pinpoint.
With Alain Vaillancourt from the City of Montreal and from the Executive Committee on Public Security, I want to play you some audio here, Alain. This is Peter Sergakis earlier in the week on this program. Of course, the business owner owns a lot of things. He is reaching a breaking point, seeing drug use and homelessness in the places he owns. Have a listen to what he said earlier this week.
They're going into the buildings, they're breaking the doors, they're bothering the tenants, the customers of the restaurants, they're going into the licensed restaurants or bars, and they're stealing the booze and they're selling it in the park. I mean, this is totally unacceptable. So that's why I wrote to the police. The police are doing nothing because there is so many incidents like that. Unless there is somebody hurt, they tell you, well, go to your insurance and put guards. We end up putting guards in the buildings to keep them out of the buildings. They go into the entrances of the building where people are living and they're doing the needs in the middle of on the hallway. It's impossible. It's impossible, and they're walking around with crowbars. They're stealing from the hardware stores chainsaws to cut doors to get in. I mean, do we need this in Montreal? And those people have to be taken care of, because we cannot have our population suffering, not only our population, the victims, but themselves too. They're dying on the sidewalks. I mean, is that what we want the tourists to come in Montreal and say, my God, this is the worst city that we visited in North America?
So I know Peter Sergakis is a polarizing figure. I'm aware of that, but I hear a lot of good things about the guy. And there's one thing to say about him. He's been here for decades. So he was saying he's been here since 1962, I think. And he's saying this is the worst he's seen it. And I questioned him on that. I said, really? 60 years worst you're seeing? And he says he doubled down. It's the worst he's ever seen. What's your reaction to Peter Sergakis?
I won't minimize what he says. It's clear that, in the streets of Montreal, we have an addiction issue. We have more increased homelessness. And that in itself leads to increased criminalities, people looking for drugs, stealing things. So I won't deny that that's happening. And it's an issue it's a priority we need to deal with. I disagree with him, however, on the issue that he says the SPVM does nothing. The SPVM, on the contrary, has changed a lot of their strategies to deal with the issue, to tackle the aspects of the crime that's involved in it. We've increased police presence, we've increased the resources, we've doubled the investigators who are arresting people, but they can't do it all. The police can't be social workers, can't be mental health workers, and that's part of the issue. Part of the issue is that the people need to be treated, need to have resources that last longer than 8 to 5, like some of the injection sites. So we desperately need more resources to help them get off the streets. Housing, housing leads to a lot of issues. There's a housing crisis. So the police can't solve it all. They're doing everything they can. We're focusing on that. But we desperately need more assistance, and everyone needs to work together as far as health, resources, getting them off the streets, housing.
When you say more assistance, you're talking about like
mental health assistance. If I look
money
at
from Quebec, you mean for that, or like what?
Sure, the provincial. We need. We're getting assistance. We have a good collaboration with social services, Municipal. We need that. We need the health services involved. When the police, I myself patrolled with Unit 21 here on a shift. Every single call we got with mental health issues, drug issues, or suicide attempts, and we'd bring them to. They would bring them to the hospital. They get admitted. Some of them. And, by the end of their shift, they're out again on the street. So we need to deal with that in and out of our services and get them off the streets.
Alain, thanks for coming in and dealing with this one, tackling this subject this week. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Elias.
Alain Vaillancourt is head of public security on Montreal's Executive Committee.